Welcome again to the Jets This Week on WinnipegFreePress.com. I'm Free Press hockey writer. This is Free Press columnist Gary Lawless. Gary, it's been 5 games under Paul Maurice so far, 4-1 after the loss to San Jose. Give us your first impressions on the small sample size under the new boss.
Well, you know, Paul Maurice has said a number of times that he hasn't changed the message so much. What's happening, I believe, is the message is being accepted. And we heard Evander Kane, Michael Frolik say just the other day that they're understanding what Paul Maurice is saying and they're believing what he said. Michael Frolik said, Paul Maurice has coached 1,000 games in the NHL. What he tells us is right. What's happening is under Claude Noel could say the sky was blue, but because he didn't have that air of legitimacy that Paul Maurice has, players would question it. They'd look at the sky. Now with Paul Maurice, they don't even look at the sky. It's blue, fine, it's blue. They're living what Paul Maurice is asking them to do.
I think what he's done too, Gary, is he's brought a lot of confidence to this crew, and it sort of builds on what you're saying, is that they believe in the message he's delivering. I don't think it's a whole lot different than what Claude Noel planned, or maybe on the X's and O's, but there's a trust in his system and a trust in themselves now, because the change has been so dramatic, and we can all say that they've done this and they've done that, but to me, it's just a belief in the locker room now.
For sure, and listen, Claude Noel, he was working with these guys for almost 3 years and not getting ahead. There had to have been friction there, just as natural. If you're working with someone and it's not working, well, in coaching, what does that lead to? It leads to negativity, it leads to yelling, and it leads to a situation where some guys weren't happy under Claude Noel anymore. You can't argue with the results. They were 0-5 in their last 5 with Noel. They're 4-1 now with Maurice. So the small sample size, very positive. Let's see what it's like after 20 games. That's the sample size I really want to have a look at.
Let's talk about the story that's still the major subplot with this club right now, and it's Dustin Byfuglien as the forward. You know, last night against San Jose and Anaheim too, I didn't think he had as much of an impact as he did in the first couple games being up front. What do they do with this guy? I mean, he can be a difference maker at both positions. There's a guy that gobbled up a lot of minutes on the defensive end, but was also prone to some brain cramps that cost him goals. Maybe a little less costly of the mistakes he makes up front. But there were 7 or 8 guys who had more minutes than him against Anaheim last night. And at the end, they brought him back and had him on the point. Is it possible that we could see more of that in a game as Paul Maurice shortens the bench, that Dustin Byfuglien starts as a forward and then maybe in critical situations in a tight game goes back to the defense to maybe be a difference maker offensively?
Dustin Byfuglien and his skills are always going to lure a coach into wanting him to play defense, because if you have that package and you can have him on the ice for almost 30 minutes a game, he can really be a benefit. However, and we watch the games, it's not just what the stats say, it's what you see. You know, Marty St. Louis alone in front of the net late in the game, and Dustin Byfuglien doesn't put a stick on him, bang, it's in the net, the Lightning win. Those plays, they don't show up in the stats other than a plus or a minus, and we saw too many of those from Dustin Byfuglien. As a forward, though, he's basically, they traded a number 1 defenseman for a third-line right wing who's playing average minutes, and not having, last night, didn't have a huge impact on the game. Now, you can say he didn't cost them the game, but did he help them win the game? Well, they didn't win. So, you know, that's what Paul Maurice and the Winnipeg Jets are going to have to wrestle with. The quandary or the riddle that Dustin Byfuglien is far from solved in my view.
One last item, let's talk about this. The Jets have Toronto and Chicago on the weekend, couple home games next week, and then a long road trip before the Olympic break. If this team keeps kind of treading water, we're seeing some progress here. Do they make a move before the trade deadline, do you think?
You know, I don't believe that Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to. Should they? Would they? You know, those are things that every person has a view on. I think that they do need to make a move in their core. I think that the group that is, and I consider their core to be Brian Little, Andrew Ladd, Dustin Byfuglien, Blake Wheeler, Toby Enstrom, you know, obviously Evander Kane, Zach Bogosian, they're unmovable. And then the other guys that are unmovable are Trouba and Scheifele. So the first 5 guys that I said, if you can move one of those guys for a number of players that still have term, you know, I lean towards doing that. I think Kevin Cheveldayoff, I don't think he will. I think you're going to see, if there are going to be any changes, it's going to be before the draft or on draft day.
I might throw this out just to wrap this up.
Sure.
As that the trade deadline approaches, you've got a couple guys in Jokinen and Setaguchi who are unrestricted free agents, who the majority of their contract's going to be eaten up. Those are pieces that you might be able to move in March, in advance of the draft, when I think you're right, because of the salary squeeze right now, that a lot of teams will be more apt to make moves then. Anyway, thanks Gary for this. This is the Jets This Week on WinnipegFreePress.com. Thanks.